What is up, y'all? UFC 305 is tomorrow, and today I'm going to bring y'all my predictions for the card and a few of the prelim fights. A lot of matchups that were stacked in the Australians' favors. Let's see if there's going to be any upsets. Starting right off, Stuart Nickel versus Jesus Aguilar. Jesus Aguilar has been kind of mid-ish as he's been in the UFC. His debut, he got finished by Tatsuro Taira, a loss that has aged very well. And since then, he's gone on to win his next two fights. One of them was by a finish. The other, I believe, was a decision, if I'm not mistaken. Oh, they were against relatively mediocre competition. Nothing that makes you go, wow, this dude is something to watch out for in this division. And Stuart Nickel, I'll be totally honest, I don't really know a lot about him. I know he's a local guy. I know this is his UFC debut. And I've been hearing a lot of good things about him. I've been hearing a lot of people praise him highly, say he looks good, has finishing power, etc., etc. So purely based off all that and the fact that we're in Australia, I'm going to take Stuart Nickel. And this is a flyweight fight, so I'm taking it by a decision. You know, usually if it's a flyweight or a women's bout that I don't know too much about, I'll just take it by decision as a safe pick. And yeah, that's what I'm doing here. I hear a lot of good things about Stuart Nickel. I have not seen anything particularly great from Jesus Aguilar, so I'm going to trust the word of mouth that I'm hearing. I'm going to trust that it's his local hometown kind of deal. You know, I don't know if it's hometown, but like same continent kind of deal. And yeah, I'm going to take Stuart Nickel by a decision. Moving along, Tom Nolan versus Alex Reyes. Tom Nolan, possibly the chinniest 6'3" lightweight out there. Alex Reyes, maybe the most inactive fighter we have right now. I'm pretty sure his last win was like 6 years ago or something. I think his last fight was like 2020, I want to say. I don't know. It's been a long time. This dude's been in and out for multiple reasons, injuries, layoffs, whatever. And for that reason, I'd pretty much pick anybody over him. But Tom Nolan here, again, local guy, absolutely massive at 6'3". If he can make the weight cut and not leave his chin on a silver platter for Alex, then he should be getting an easy KO here, probably in the first round, maybe the second if Alex will survive. Yeah, he's just way too inactive for me to like that, and I think Tom Nolan, you know, he's still really new in the UFC. I believe this would be his third or fourth fight. Dude's hungry, and if he's not gonna go brain dead in the octagon, then we should be getting a layup of a KO for him. Moving along, Jack Jenkins, Herbert Burns. I don't even have much to say about this one. Herbert Burns, notorious quitter in the octagon, and Jack Jenkins has been, you know, not bad in the UFC. He hasn't been as good as you maybe would have hoped he would be, but definitely good enough for me to think that if he's going against somebody who's going to quit as much as Herbert Burns does, that he can probably break him, hit him with some nice hard low kicks, hit him with some good straights, and just eventually get that TKO on him. Probably, maybe second round, early third, something like that. Moving along, Casey O'Neill, Lana Santos. Santos took this fight on short notice. She was originally supposed to fight somebody. I don't even remember who she was supposed to fight, but I remember that it was somebody who looked like an absolute layup for Casey O'Neill. I say that with quotation marks because WMMA, and Casey O'Neill's not that good herself. But now that it's Lana Santos, I'm definitely taking Santos by a decision. I know it's short notice for her, and she has to travel halfway across the world, and Casey O'Neill's already there, but Santos has been showing some promise. She definitely seems to have some talent for this kind of thing, and Casey O'Neill is just not that good. That's really it. I think Santos has the talent. I don't really think Casey O'Neill does. And yeah, that's all I have to say on that one as well. Moving along, Josh Culibao and Ricardo Ramos. This is one where I kind of picked it based off you look at the resumes. Ricardo Ramos got finished in the first round by Lerone Murphy, got finished in like the first or the second round by Charles Jourdain, got finished by Julian Erosa. Josh Culibao, he took Lerone Murphy to a decision. He took Charles Jourdain to a draw. And the opponents in between that he's winning and losing to are just overall slightly better than the ones Ricardo Ramos is losing to. I mean, Ricardo Ramos is also losing to like Zubaira Tukugov and stuff. So I'm going to take Culibao by a decision here. I don't know if I don't think he has very much finishing power or finishing potential in this fight. However, Ricardo Ramos has obviously shown an affinity to being finished, so I wouldn't be surprised if Culibao did end up getting a solid TKO or submission here, especially, again, being the hometown guy. But Josh Culibao just hasn't impressed me enough for me to really feel confident in taking him by a finish of any sort. So I think he's just going to get himself a solid little, probably a 30-27 here, not even a 29-28. Junior Tafa and Walter Walker. Now, this one's almost got me tempted to pick Walter. I'm almost tempted to pick Walter Walker. But I just don't ever trust, like, when a UFC fighter is, like, moderately successful or highly successful, and then they have a sibling join the UFC, that sibling is almost always garbage. Or even if they're not garbage, they are nowhere close to as good as their sibling was. Examples could include Valentina Shevchenko's sister. Alex Reyes earlier on the card is Dominic Reyes' brother. Tracy Cortez's brother couldn't even get into the UFC. He couldn't even make it past the Contender Series. And now we got Walter Walker here, Johnny Walker's brother. And if that wasn't enough, the Tafa brothers are actually, like, pretty solid. I know what I just said about all the brothers, but these two are, like, in the UFC. They got in at about the same time, and they're both performing about the same. So they're more of a Diaz situation. But generally, when the fighter joins, like, a few years after their sibling, that's when I, like, have problems. But if they both get in at about the same time, then it's kind of different. That being said, though, simply because there's that itch in the back of my mind of picking Walter Walker by a decision here, I think I want to take Tafa by a decision. I know the obvious answer for him, if he's going to win, would be by a knockout. And it's probably going to happen, and I'm going to look stupid for picking him by a decision. But something about me just says Walter Walker could maybe survive long enough. I think he'll look terrible the entire time, but somehow he'll survive and make it to a decision. And that's really all I got to say. Finally, onto the main card. Jingling finally makes his comeback, guys, after so long. And it's against Carlos Prates. Tough draw, man. Tough draw. I'm going Carlos Prates by a finish, a TKO, most likely. Jingling's had a long layoff, and it wasn't just him kind of rebuilding himself. It was him coming out of spine injuries and back injuries, and it was, I mean, those kinds of ones are career enders. You know, you've heard DC talk about him in the past. It's awful. And to come back against a guy like Carlos Prates, I know he's not like some crazy undefeated prospect, but he's getting some crazy finishes in the UFC. That one over Charles Radke had shades of Peyton Talbot in the way he was just watching him, and eyed that finish. He's got the eyes for it, you know. He can see how to TKO you. He's coming out of the Fighting Nerds gym, which is doing excellent right now. And just generally is looking good, you know. He's been active. He's a bit younger, if I'm not mistaken, like 2-3 years. But they're both right at like the mid-30s mark. So that 2-3 years makes a big difference right around there. And yeah, I feel bad for my boy the Leech that this is what he has to come back to. I'm happy to see him back. I would love for him to get the W. But I definitely just see Carlos Prates getting this TKO. Moving along, we got the blobs of the night, Tai Tuivasa and Biggie Boy Rosen Strike. Listen, I like Tai Tuivasa. The shoey is fun. But this dude's ran his course. As soon as he beat Derek Lewis and got jumped to number 3 in the rankings, I knew it was wraps for his career. He never deserved to be that high in the rankings. He never should have been. He was never ready for it. He never will be ready for that. I mean, it was the worst thing that happened to his career. And the best, I guess, because it was definitely what kind of skyrocketed his name up. But he's done nothing but lose since then. And I just don't see that changing. I take Biggie Boy by a TKO here, or a knockout probably. I mean, I think it will probably come in the second round or late first after Tuivasa realizes he's not going to get his knockout. Jairzinho's just actually got some technique to him. Tai Tuivasa, not really. You know, he's just the Derek Lewis type, but a bit faster, I would say, and less powerful. I think Rosenstrike can deal with that every day of the week. I think his technique will negate the speed Tai Tuivasa could have. And he can definitely eat any shot Tai throws at him, I feel like. So, yeah, sorry, Tai. It was fun while you were here. I don't think you're getting cut after this fight, but definitely on your way out. And it's a shame. It's a real shame. Because that Derek Lewis KO, it doesn't even look good. So you don't even have much to live off of as a legacy. Oh, man. It's a real shame to see. And I don't even like Rosenstrike all that much. It's like, bruh, couldn't we get like somebody a little more interesting to climb up the rankings? It really feels like Jairzinho should be higher up in the rankings than he is. But like somehow he's always stuck right at that number 12 to number 8 range, just fighting and losing to blobs. It's like he wins a couple of blobs and then he gets like a Cyril Gahn on his come up or something like that. And gets reset and then fights another couple blobs, So here's one of his couple of blobs, and he's going to finish Tai Tuivasa. I think you guys all kind of saw that pick coming. Featured fight, Mateusz Gamrot versus Dan Hooker. Great fight. Winnable one for Dan Hooker. That being said, I'm taking Gamrot by decision. Gamrot's resume definitely looks better than I think he actually is. That being said, though, going scramble for scramble with Sarukian and seeing how Sarukian's grown shows me that his ground game is legit as hell, no matter what you want to say. And I don't think Hooker's ground game is there, I think he can piece him up on the feet, but I don't see how he doesn't just have a very similar performance as to what he did against Jalen Turner. Jalen Turner's not as much of a dog as Dan Hooker, but has a lot more power. And I think both of those things almost benefit him in a fight against Gamrot. So this is just kind of like a worse stylistic Turner in terms of a Mateusz Gamrot matchup, Like, he's going to be more aggressive, which is going to lead to him being more open for double legs and getting taken down, I think. And he doesn't have the same level of power to make him pay for shots. And I know Dan Hooker has, the big old knee that they always hyped up, especially during that Michael Chandler fight. And he's got the hangman, the guillotine. But Gamrot's smart about those kinds of things. I don't think he's just going to get walloped with a knee right up the middle. I mean, when was the last time you even saw Hooker throw the knee? Like, really, let's be honest here. When was the last time you saw him even attempt a guillotine, let alone get it? Like, let's be honest with ourselves here. Look, Dan Hooker can win this fight. But if you asked me to explain to you how, I would be at a loss for words. So when I can't even explain to you how I think a guy would win, I could just tell you I think he could win. I'm definitely taking the other guy. That's really end of story on that one. Co-main event, Kai Kara-France versus Steve Erceg. Kai Kara-France has always felt better than he actually is, I think. I think the fact that he's been at the top of the division for so long makes him kind of seem better than he is. And I know that sounds stupid to say, especially when he has fantastic wins under his belt like Askar Askarov. But his game just really isn't that diverse, I feel like. His grappling has never really stood out to me in any way, shape, or form. And when it comes to his striking, he's got a really good overhand and he moves really well. But there's just not that much variety in him. And I think Steve Erceg could take full advantage of that. I mean, this dude has maybe the best boxing in that entire division. So standing with him is a problem. And it's not like, I don't think Kai is going to go for any sort of grappling on Steve Erceg. But we already saw Erceg went against Pantoja, arguably the best grappler in the division, and held his own very well. Was even shooting his own takedowns onto Pantoja. As much of a mistake as those were, it showed the level of confidence he was having. And I think if he does something like that against Kai, he gets it. Because I don't think Kai's that good of a grappler. And Steve Erceg is incredibly well-rounded. He's staying super active. I mean, he just fought for the title 5 months ago? Now he's back into it, fighting like the number 3 guy. And he's only been in the UFC for 2 years now, I want to say. Pretty crazy what he's done in such a short amount of time. He's kind of having a flyweight version of Alex Pereira's run in a sense right now. The difference is he didn't win the title. But other than that, I mean, he's doing fantastically. And you could argue he beat Pantoja in that other fight. So he kind of did win the title. So yeah, Steve Ursug's just kind of been looking really, really good lately. And Kai has been very inactive lately. He's been having a bunch of injuries, keeps pulling out of fights, and really has just not done a lot recently to make me have a ton of faith in him, whereas Steve Ursug just keeps piling on reasons as to why he's good and you should look into this guy and put your faith into him. And for that reason, I'm taking him by a decision. I don't think Kai Kara's chin is bad enough to get knocked out. He has been TKO'd to the body. We saw that against Brandon Moreno. And I do think Steve Ursug could exploit that with, a good hook to the body or possibly a body kick. But I don't trust it at flyweight unless you're like going against Matt Schnell or you're a Davison Figueiredo. I just don't trust you to get the finish. Submissions are a different story, but I think we can pretty confidently say neither of these guys are going to go for a submission. So Steve Ursug by decision. That's my final pick. Finally, main event time. Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. Israel Adesanya has been looking jacked, like absolutely massive in a lot of the recent photos we've seen of him. And it's almost making me want to change my pick. The early round 1, round 2 Adesanya counterpunch KO looks pretty tempting, especially with du Plessis' style. The mass Izzy has put on. I mean, it's very tempting pick to make. But I think Dricus has really good eyes to see attacks that are coming at him, to see openings. He looks super goofy, but he keeps winning, and he keeps coming out with really good game plans. So I think we need to start giving this dude some credit on what he can see and how he can adapt and adjust. He's going to be smart. I think he's going to be very aware of the fact that Izzy has never gotten a finish in his career outside of the second round. And because of that, he'll play those first couple of rounds maybe a bit safer. And even if he doesn't, he's going to be aware of it and fight in a way that will not leave him open to those big counter punches. Dricus is a bit chinny, but we've never seen him get super wobbled outside of maybe the Darren Till fight, which I know that's Darren Till. But if you remember how that first round went, you remember he kind of had a bit of an adrenaline dump in that second round, which led to that. I think du Plessis is going to be locked in for this entire fight. I think his forward pressure and constant 1-2s with his hands that he's probably going to throw out, along with probably a body kick here and there, is just going to be very reminiscent of what Sean Strickland was doing to him. Except this time, Dricus is even bigger, more muscular, has better grappling, and not only does he have better grappling, but he will actually use it against his opponents. And that's totally what I see here is Dricus being very physical, very using his size, trying to be very big in that cage, getting close to Izzy, getting in his face, cutting off any space he has to shoot any massive, knockout shots. And Dricus, getting him up against the fence, going for those takedowns. I think Dricus can get him to the ground and control him. I know Izzy has a long history of, it's oh, you may be able to get him down, but you're not going to be able to control him. I think du Plessis is going to be able to control him. I don't think he's going to get a submission, but I think he will ground and pound him viciously. If he starts ground and pounding him, I think Izzy will then be able to start working his way out to get back up. He won't stay in the ground and pound for too long. But if Dricus commits to ground and pound, he can get a solid 10, 15 seconds worth of elbows and hammer fists raining down on Izzy. And if he does settle for just control and some light shots to the body and whatnot, I think he'll steal rounds that way easily. I think when he does hit Izzy, it's going to look pretty hard too. Izzy is obviously going to pop his head back a lot with his straights, 1-2s. But outside of that, I don't see his hooks or uppercuts really landing all that well. Like I said, Dricus, he looks super chinny, but he eats shots pretty well. So I don't see Izzy just getting that flash KO on him unless he just is absolutely bum rushing in like an idiot. Which, as I've previously stated, I think du Plessis is a lot smarter than we give him credit for. And I don't see that happening. So I'm taking du Plessis by a decision. I think Izzy will definitely take a round or two, but that will mostly because du Plessis is playing it safer in the earlier rounds, trying not to be another one of Izzy's highlights. More so than it would be Izzy straight up beating Drakkar for a round, if that makes any sense. And with that, those are my UFC 305 predictions, you guys. We got a banger of a card tomorrow. I'm looking forward to it. Please let me know what your guys' predictions are in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. Stay violent.